Mark with Cardivox Academy here, and today we are going to be going over a very highly requested subject. I get a lot of questions on this. I've been wanting to make a video on it for months. I've got a couple extra seconds to breathe today, so we are going to be talking about high vocals. Now, one thing you probably noticed is the intro slide that we used for this video was different than the one that we normally have. I made it using a video editing software called Movavi, who was kind enough to sponsor this video, and it's actually really cool. I would say that the main thing I like about it is how easy it is to use. You can see right here me actually editing this video, which may seem like some sort of Inception madness, but it's actually pretty easy to do. Point is, this is extremely user-friendly. I've used a lot of different video editing software. I opened this up and it almost felt like I just kind of knew how to use it. It was super intuitive, drag and drop, not a hard learning curve. Plus, they've got all sorts of cool libraries with built-in effects, extra effects that you can buy that honestly look really cool and are generally more affordable. Anyways, there's a link below to try it out for free, and if you like it, there's a 20% off discount code. Give it a try, see what you think. Okay, but let's get down to business, right? False chord high vocals. What do they sound like? Those are some examples of a false chord high vocal that's been produced. What do they sound like raw? So those are some examples of a false chord high vocal raw. How do we make that sound? What even is that sound? Let's break it apart a little bit. Let's dissect it, and let's talk about it step by step. Okay, so since this is a false chord vocal, we are building it on a false chord sound. So your base false chord sound, the very foundation false chord sound that you have, is done by not engaging the true folds, but by engaging the false vocal folds, which sit just above it. And it kind of sounds like this.
Hey everybody, my name is Mark. What's going on? It kind of sounds like I'm trying a little too hard to be tough.
Now that sound is where a lot of people do and should start. With that, we want to make sure that we can feel the resonance forward over the pencil, the humming technique I use with a lot of my students to get that forward buzz. And then we also want to make sure that we feel the gritty, distorted feeling on our soft palate. Because in fact, when I do a high vocal, I actually don't feel anything in my throat. Everything feels distorted up top and resonant and buzzy in the front. So that's going to be what you want to master first, before you even get into trying to push these false chord vocals high. There are a couple very simple things you can do. Basically, start off at just like a normal speaking tone, and then as you work with it, as you make that sound, right here like this sound, you can sort of play with different vocal positions. Now, when I say vocal positions, what do I mean? Depending on the school of singing and screaming, and depending on the instructor, vocal position can mean different thing. Sometimes people mean posture. Other times people mean like whether you're not in you're in chest, your head voice. That's closer to what we mean here. Let me describe to you what I mean. So when I do a high false chord vocal, I am holding the anatomy of my face, my soft palate, my jaw, my tongue, everything. I'm holding it in a position that sounds really goofy if I use my true chords. It sounds a little bit like this. This is the position. This is the space where my high vocals sit. Now, this might sound a little familiar to you. It might sound like some voices you've heard before.
What's up, Doc?
Or if you were a big Cartoon Network fan like I was growing up, maybe you thought of this guy.
Yes, Dexter, I can read your thoughts, and I am smarter than you.
Okay, don't worry, I'm not going to make you listen to that obnoxious voice for very much longer. But that is a very head-resonant voice. Now, I want to talk to you about how to make that. One thing that sometimes people think is that they have to have a falsetto, a really high breathy tone. But if you even speak like that for very long, you're going to notice that holding your larynx in that super raised position is going to make you tired pretty quick. So instead of a thin, weak, falsetto voice, we want a resonant, high, muzzy voice. A voice that makes our nose feel like it's vibrating, our hard palate feel like it's shaking like crazy. That position is going to be a lot more easy to endure. Honestly, like, you could do that, like, you could do a whole set, 45-minute set of pure high vocals in this position, and as long as you're doing everything else right, you're not going to run out of steam. Now, of course, when I'm doing this, I'm using my true folds, right? Because you can hear my actual voice. But if I take that and I use it with the false chord voice we talked a little bit about earlier, hey, this right here, yay, and then I put a little bit of diaphragm underneath it, you're going to get something like this. Yeah! Now, I like to, with my highs, when I'm just defaulting to just a random sound like that, I like to say the word yeah or ye. Yeet. But and e are very nice, high, buzzy sounds. If you say e, you'll feel your tongue coming up and the airstream going through and basically your hard and soft palate just buzzing. So naturally, you're gonna be in this position, but you'll have to work a little bit for the nasality. But what's nasality? Our nasal voice is controlled by our soft palate, aka the velum, and the velum is that flap of fleshy skin in the back that when you open your mouth, there's the uvula hanging from it and it looks disgusting. Well, the velum closes off the nasopharynx, and essentially, we can use that to either have like a really forward resonance, or we can have a really resonant nasal voice. So, let's do a quick recap. First step, simple false chord speaking voice, right here like this. Hey, I'm Batman, where's the girl? Obviously a little higher than,
where's the girl?
But that's because we don't want everything sitting down here. Next, we make sure that our resonance is in the front of our mouth. Hey, oh, there it is. When I do that, my hard palate is buzzing. After that, we snap into our nasal resonance position right here. Yay! Oh, see, we're getting higher. Last but not least, we invite our diaphragm into the party. Yay! Now, I want to talk about some misconceptions with high false chord vocals. One of which we've talked about before, that's that you have to pull your larynx as high up as you possibly can and try to exist in this space. I won't go too much into detail about that again, but one thing you can do to kind of monitor your larynx movement is just take 2 fingers, put it on your larynx, and do a high. Your larynx is going to raise, it will do that, but you don't want to feel like it's pulling up. It should feel natural, just enough to make the sound that you need, nothing beyond that. The second misconception that I hear about high vocals a lot, and it's tough when there's not like a textbook of this stuff, so people are mistaken sometimes, and that's okay. I've been mistaken before too, but the next mistake or misconception that I hear about false chord vocals is that they're inherently uncompressed and that you can't hold them for long because there's no way to control your breath. That's going to be another video that comes later. People saying that you can't compress and hold false chord vocals in general. That's an important subject we need to talk about, but let's just put it in the context of high vocals for now. So, anytime we're making any sound with our vocal anatomy, even if we're just whispering, hey, what's up? What's going on? We're compressing airflow. A non-compressed airflow sounds like this. Doesn't sound like much, right? False chord highs, non-compressed, false. The second is that you can't hold them for very long. While it is true, this is true, that vocal fry, fry screams in general are going to be easier to hold out long, you certainly can hold your vocals for a pretty decent amount of time with false chord. The fact of the matter is, the longest phrase, and there might be a longer section, but the longest phrase that I've ever needed to hold was about 8 seconds, and anything longer than that, rather than holding it all in one breath, why would I not just write lyrics that allow me to have easier breath management. And that's actually a really interesting topic for video as well. Not necessarily the technique of making the vocal, but the technique for being strategic about your breathing in a live setting or in a recording session. Especially with highs, because once you get them down, they're pretty easy, and you can build your phrases so you have a chance to take sips of air throughout your phrase. But anyways, I'm a little off topic. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about false chord high vocals. For those among us who may be a little bit more experienced, they can do a high, but they just want to get a little bit more out of it. There are a couple things you can do to get more out of your highs and to make your highs higher. Now, I don't think that somebody being able to get as high as possible with their vocals is the end-all be-all of being a good vocalist. I would rather have a good solid tone than like, oh, they can go all across the spectrum, but it always sounds thin and breathy. However, once you've got your tone down, you probably want to get a little bit higher. One band that does this extremely well is Croesus. Their new album, which they did not ask me to talk about, I am just literally in love with it. It came out just recently, A Memoir of Free Will. There are a lot of examples of moving your high vocal around, so even if you're not into the band, this is just a great thing for you to listen to that involves a lot of high vocal manipulation. So there are two ways that we can do this. The first is with playing around. The first is by playing around with that head voice resonance, right? And starting with this voice and then making it more nasal, right? So up here, if we can do this. Now, again, we're not going, and making it up here, right there. Like, even that felt uncomfortable to me. But right here, like this, and not that hard. So if we can take the nasal resonance and push it as high as possible, our vocals will go from here, yay, to here, yay. You see that? All we did was move our resonance, our head voice higher up, essentially, maintaining the vibration of that mask. The second is that we can use our tongue to narrow the airstream and thin it out and actually purposefully add a little bit more breathiness to it. Here's an example of what that sounds like. Now, this way can be a little bit trickier because if you don't have your distortion placement down really well, you can feel it fall back into your throat, and you don't want that crackly, sharp feeling on your vocal folds or even your false chords. You want to maintain it up here. You don't want to start coughing or anything like that. But in yesterday's video, when we talked about Anal Nathrak, he has this phrase where he says, "Is this what you need? Is this what you need?" And that's part of the way that he did that. And I know I just recently said there was one more thing I wanted to go over, but there's one more thing I want to go over. Sometimes people come to me and what they're doing is they're making the distortion the same way that they would hock a loogie. And while maybe it sounds like that's the right direction, it's not. Reason is, the majority of the time that we do highs, we actually have space between our tongue and our soft palate, because that's what we're doing. If you make this noise, you're basically pressing your tongue to your soft palate and forcing air through that space. Now, that's a very compressed way to do it, but the distortion is not coming from slamming these two things together. The distortion is coming from compressing the air with our false chords, and then that thin stream of air moving through a thin yet open space in our mouths to rattle the soft tissues. The air right there, the breath had free reign to move as it needed to. However, the space itself was thinner. That made the airstream stronger, which hit these soft tissues up top that can handle it a little bit harder and made them rattle, and thus we got the distortion sound. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for a brief intro into false chord high vocals. Highs are where I got my start. When I started with metal vocals, I love them. They're wonderful. If you need help with false chord high vocals, or false chord low vocals, or false chord mid vocals, or even clean singing, reach out to me at carterbox1010@gmail.com. And we will send you some information. My buddy Alex, he works my inbox for me. He's a wonderful dude. He'll send you some information about the lessons. I'll send you some information about the lessons. It'll be a great time. But that being said, many thanks, much love. I'm out. Reach out to me there. Wonderful.